Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode When Worlds Collide. As you can see from my screen, we got some very special guests today. We have the always beautiful and amazing Sonia Watkins back with us.
Hi, how are you? I forgot I wasn't at the last one. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Like, wait a minute.
Yep. And then, of course, we have the awesome and totally amazing Rob Eastman here.
How are you guys? Glad to be here. Happy to be here.
Awesome, man. So before we get into general conversation, I wanted to see if you wanted to kind of give us a testimonial, your background, and kind of go from there.
Yeah, so I'm just born and raised in Utah. Got a family, younger brother, 3 older sisters, mom and dad. I think I grew up pretty normal. And for a redhead, any redheads out there, they understand what I'm talking about. For a redhead, you always got to add that disclaimer in there. We come with a warning symbol. Utah's a different thing. I think the more I get around the country and do what I'm doing, I find every little state has its own little subculture of things that make it different or hard or difficult or great at the same time. And ours, we have a very strong hold of a religious group, and so there's a lot of expectation from a young age. And I just got into school and really struggled. One, sitting still. I was ADHD, and back in the 80s and early 90s, the teachers weren't equipped to deal with that. And so I'm bouncing off the walls. I'm getting made fun of by teachers, which led on to the playground by kids and physically being bullied. And very early, in and out of the doctor's office trying to figure out what's wrong with me, why I'm broken. And when you're a little kid, all you want to do is fit in. And that led me on a path of, third grade, thinking about ending my life, and held on for that as long as I could. The only time I felt well was when I was playing sports. I was always a good athlete, better than most, and led me into a lot of fighting. I was the smallest kid on the playground always, and you got a choice. You can cower or you can step up. And at the time, I didn't know that you could actually hurt yourself. I didn't know that you could end your life. I didn't know any of those things. I just knew that I hated how I felt. And most of it came from the people being mean to me at school. So I just started fighting. And that led me into a whole other world of, dark mental health, and wasn't quite like everybody else at church. Didn't feel like I fit in with them. I just could never find my place. And really just got to the point of deciding whether. So my family, we have a long history of mental illness. So my dad's an only child. His father, we just found out, had schizophrenia and was put in a psych ward like back in the 40s or 50s when my father was just barely born. His mother had mentioned like either his dad was a bad guy or he didn't want him or something. I can't remember exactly, but and so my dad grows up feeling like his dad wasn't around, and he got adopted by this other dad, and that's where we get our last name. And he was an amazing man, but he ended up getting in a trucking accident and driving his semi truck off of a bridge. And almost a year to the date of that, his mother committed suicide. So my dad, coming from nothing and seeing his oldest boy struggling, I think there was so much fear in knowing what's at the end of that road that he, rather than prepared me for that, he protected me from it. And which kind of clipped my wings and made it so I didn't learn the life skills I needed in order to get to where, drugs and alcohol weren't the answer. So when I was about 9th grade, I ended up trying to commit suicide, playing Russian roulette. And he brought me in the garage, and he's like, you know what? If you were to kill yourself, I don't know what I would do. I might kill myself. And in that moment, I'm like, man, I don't want my dad to hurt. I love my dad. So rather than getting the help I needed, I just went deeper into wearing that fake smile and pretending who I was and making things okay. So my choices were now not break the word of wisdom or not do what I told my church I wouldn't do, drink or do drugs. And I definitely can't kill myself because I don't want my dad to hurt. And I'm fighting these two battles. There was no in between for me. It's either I was super happy or suicidal. There was no, I just didn't have, something was not there in my brain. And so obviously when I smoked weed for the first time, it was game on. I was like, okay, these people accept me. They think like me. I don't feel depressed anymore. I don't have anxiety anymore. And when you feel that way and you find something, you just want to drink from that fountain all the time. So from a very early stage, I was addicted from, alcoholic easily, probably by the age of 18, taking pills. I could have 100 pills or I could have 5 pills. They'd all be gone in the same amount of time, which, again, led me down a road of pretending and acting and letting people down and feeling ashamed. So we can get more into that. I don't know if you guys have any questions, but that's kind of my, I came from a great family, and I think Sonia, you should understand this portion. When we were talking, I'm a lot like your son as far as I had the options. I didn't have to grow up rough, but I just didn't feel like that was where I fit in. And I didn't know how to make that. That was like I felt like a fraud putting on that white collared shirt and walking into a place that I didn't feel comfortable, that didn't make me feel good. And I just didn't have any answers for that.
I listened to you tell this story and it's like living it all over again as a mom. Just my clue to what caused Ronnie's, it's probably more just mental illness or something in particular. And I've done enough research, read enough of his stuff that he did write down that I know that there's some kind of something that happened in his life that helped him go down that path. I can't really know for sure. I never will. And so it's just kind of guessing. But when I listen to you, it's like living Ronnie's life over again. And it's just so sad because it doesn't have to be that way, in my opinion. You and I talked about that.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be that way. If people were more, this is going back to my message and what my book is about, and yours is kind of probably the same, just different words, same story, But if people could just learn to love and accept and try to see people for who they are and not what you want them to be. Yeah. And I belong to that great religion that you're raised in, and I love my church, but the culture does need to change a little bit, and I see it changing. Yeah. That expectation is just unreal sometimes that's put on you. And
I think I try not to give them too much credit anymore. Just the fact that the Bible Belt, anywhere that has anything like that, there's going to be standards of living. Just like if you grow up in the hood, there's a standard of living. Like you need to be like this, and if you're not, you're a punk or you're weak or you're, whatever it is. And that's just tough. And I think for me, it's like I can think back right when it first started happening in kindergarten. When I first started faking who I was, because nobody, I would be me and it would bug people. I'd be too hyper. I'd be this or that. And I just instantly became whatever you needed me to be. And when you get good at that, then it's like, what do you think's going to happen?
Because Ronnie wasn't a little guy, was he, jerk? He was a big guy from the moment he came out of me. I mean, he is big. And he told me one time and my dad was a big man. My dad was 6'7". Ronnie was 6'4". They both told me, and my dad was in prison and lived a rough life too. And that's a whole nother story, but they both told me once that just because you're a big guy doesn't mean that you don't get picked on either. So if you go into a bar, the big guy is the one that everybody wants to go after. And I didn't realize that. So, he's like, I had to be tough because I'm the one that stands out. And I never thought of that. I never thought of that. I always thought I didn't worry too much about Ronnie on the streets. I did for different reasons other than I didn't think he'd get beat up, and
Yeah.
Dirk knows more about Ronnie on the streets than I do. And I just know that I've done enough research in Ronnie's life. I've listened to you. You really, that night or that day listening to you, I was just like living it over again. And I just thought, gosh, we just need to accept people and love people. You just do. I have so much 100% belief in that. I've done it myself. I've changed my whole way of life just by forgetting what I was taught and forgetting the little voices on my shoulder telling me, that guy's a bad guy because he looks like this, or I'm one that will walk up to the strangest looking people in the world and just start talking to them. And I wasn't like that before. Believe me. So
I love it.
and Dirk can attest to a big change in me at Ronnie's funeral. It was like overnight. And some of these, Dirk didn't know me too well, but a lot of Ronnie's friends did. And they've all said it like, wow, I didn't know you were that cool. I'm like, well, I wasn't really.
You're like,
I don't know that I am still, but I wasn't back then. So
yeah.
Ronnie's life changed mine. And for that, I'm grateful. I wish I didn't have to lose him to figure that out, but
Yeah, I think that loss, that can do it to us. The more I go through this deal, so I work with youth and adults and families, and we're in this saving culture. We're in this destination mindset that if this were to happen, this would be okay. And if we make this money, or I'm going to switch my kid's schools because he's being bullied. It's like, you can't run from that. And the sooner we can let little kids, like, teach them what's really coming down the pipeline, let them know, like, this isn't going to go away. We need to know, like, love and respect ourselves and understand boundaries, and let them learn the skills necessary to deal with the bullies, to look at themselves in the mirror and appreciate what they see. Then they can leave with real confidence. Like,
I have the confidence to talk about it because it's such a, I don't know. In my life, everything like that was, you just didn't talk about it. It was just not, it just wasn't.
So parents swoop in, save their kid. Your kid falls off his bike, and before he even hits the ground, you're catching him. And you're crying, so he's crying, and then that gets used. And then when they're actually out on their own, it's really hard you feel less than, you feel ashamed because you should know these things. Some people know these things, you don't know those things. It's like work ethic. I think I know more addicted rich kids than poor, because they don't have to learn the hard stuff the hard way, like the kids that don't come up with money have to. They have better work ethic. They're more street savvy. They're all these things. And we're up here with all these opportunities and sad and in rehabs and depressed. And it's crazy. It's nothing. The money doesn't buy anything. I think experience and learning from your own mistakes, and hopefully guiding our own kids, somewhat guiding them to a safer approach, and not having to make some of the mistakes we made. But ultimately, man, I had to learn the hard way every time.
I think that's a real valid point too, how you said that, like, even the rich kids and stuff like that are dealing with the same problems, that you don't necessarily have to go through a crap upbringing and have to have these detrimental things in your life to make you turn to drugs, where, I mean, you can even have a perfect upbringing and still fall victim to the same addictions as everyone else. It's just, I mean, when I was living in Massachusetts, there was kids on Cape Cod, and they used to call it methadone mile because downtown Boston was horrible. And I mean, there's kids with, the most expensive houses on the East Coast, and they're still out there on the main avenue looking to score pills and stuff like that. And it's crazy that it doesn't really have, there's no like set type of person that drugs will attach itself to.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't discriminate.
Right.
That's go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, you keep going.
Did you say that's like these kids are like, well, when they see me and I'm covered in tattoos and I own companies and I've got nice cars and I'm doing it. And I'm just like, nah, it doesn't work that way. Like you don't get to go and act how you want and expect that you're going to get A, B, C, and D. It doesn't work that way. Like most people who have been through what we've been through are dead.
Yeah.
And that's just fact. You don't get to do the things, at least that I've done, and survive. It's like, there's a reason. Now I got to earn it and I got to go back out. And the craziest thing that's happening is all of those things that I didn't want anybody to know. The more I share them, the more I have real people around me. How crazy is that?
Right.
It's like everything we were told not to tell people, keep that a secret. People might not like you. I say in front of 1,500 people, and 1,000 of those come up and shake my hand after and tell me, thank you, you saved my life. It's like everybody's society, this bullshit culture of the hush hush, don't talk about it, is killing us. And
That's
we're
what
so
I was
like,
gonna ask you. What are you doing? What are you doing to take your message out? What is it that these people are coming up to you? What are you doing to take your message out?
man, like just how do I approach it?
Yeah. What I know, I mean, I could say what you do. I want you to say what, like today, you said that you, before we got started, how many speaking engagements that you
Yeah. So I want, I can go and speak to a room full of execs and suit and ties and doctors and all of that. But the biggest thing is I wish I would have had a me when I was a little kid. Somebody that loved me and also told me, that's not going to work, dude. This is what's going to happen, and educated me enough that if I did do it, I couldn't say to anybody, I didn't know. Like how many times can you think back as a kid? Well, I didn't know. I'm sorry. Because parents didn't tell us, like, don't have sex, don't drink, don't do drugs. Why? Do you see that egg frying in the pan? That's your brain on drugs. Like all these scare tactics. There was no education. There was no fact to it. There was no like, I love you enough to be honest with you. So when I go into these schools and I just share my story, and I'm blunt and I'm a pretty big guy as far as muscles and they see me kind of like a superhero, but I'm up there crying. I'm up there being vulnerable. I'm doing everything they said a man wasn't. And it's starting to change their mind and changing their culture that, look, whatever's happened to you, I'm sorry that happened, but it's 100% your responsibility to fix it.
I love that. I love
all
that.
you're going to do is pass it on to your girlfriend or your boyfriend or whatever. And you're just passing off all these traumas that you hate, that you would never want to give to your worst enemy. But because you're not fixing them yourself, you love somebody else comes in and fills your cup. And when they stop filling it, you traumatize them and move on. And we've got to just like the vulnerability of an AA room or sitting around with people who are sitting with homeless people and you have a conversation. Almost every time I do that, I go do homeless outreach, I meet at least 10 dudes that are 10,000 times smarter than I am. They should be a CEO of something, but they didn't have the opportunity to have the mental health bills or see a doctor or understand how to work through the trauma that I did. It's like, there's some brilliant people out there and we're throwing them out to the streets, trash, trauma, they're drug addicts, they're whatever, all this stigma that we have out on everybody. And they're amazing people.
Your vibe feels like I feel it. Like I know what you're saying. I go and speak too. I haven't done as nearly as much as you've done, a little bit of speaking. And when Ronnie died and I was sitting up at the stand getting ready to speak, and I looked out, I've said this before, I looked out and there's all these people in the back of the chapel, a Mormon chapel in the back, all the white shirts and ties, all the supporters of me and my husband were up front, and the black shirts in the back were my son's friends. And I remember writing on the bottom of my talk, I need to know every one of these people. And I can honestly say that I've done my very best to get at the funeral and at the burial. I shook the hand of every one of them and got to know them. Some of them more better than others. But I've made a difference in their lives. I know I have. They tell me all the time, I've got a few friends that are drug addicts still and reach out to me when they need help. Most of the time they just need somebody to say, I love you and I care. What can I do to help you? You know, that kind of thing. I just know what you're saying. And it's just, I'm on the other end of it, who had lost, my son died, what you're talking about. He didn't make it. He was brilliant. He was tender-hearted, big old bear, you know. He just didn't make it. And so I'm the other end of that to say, my son was him. My son was Rob, but he didn't make it. And
I can imagine, Jerk, how it must be when you get I've got a little neck tattoo, but how people look at you with a face tattoo, you just without even saying hi, you're already gonna get judged. You're already, and then you add dreadlocks. That just double whammy. So
and I
me and
love
my
that.
girlfriend's got dreadlocks, but people literally like cross the road.
Mhm.
And I'm strong enough in myself now that I love that, because there's a pretty damn good chance that I'm going to be on a stage that they're sitting in the crowd. They're gonna be like, oh, okay, maybe we'll listen.
Well,
And
let's hope they are.
And they just don't understand anything behind it. It's like the only people that dare talk to me about my tattoos are usually the 70 to 80-year-old women that their husbands were like in the Navy, and they're like rubbing my arms. Like this old lady, I was in Walmart, and I just feel these little hands like rubbing my arm. And I looked down, kind of freaked out because I was alone. And it was a little white-haired lady, and she's like, "These are so beautiful." And I was like, "Hi, how are you?" And she's like, "Can you tell me about your tattoos? My husband had them." It's like it zapped her back to 1960.
Yeah.
And that meant something to her. But people are so afraid of like the initial shock of, oh my gosh. But when they talk about like your body's a temple, they're not, there's artwork.
I've said that before.
Right? But then you're feeding yourself sugar drinks and fattening foods. It's like, where do you draw the line? It's okay for you to be 400 pounds, but it's not okay for me to have tattoos. Like the judgment is just so one-sided, and they just don't get it.
Yeah.
And my journey really is to, you know what, if you want to judge me, at least come ask me first. Let's have a conversation, strike it up.
Tattoos haven't necessarily been something I was hung up on. Ronnie started getting tattoos when he was really young without the first time he got a tattoo. It's a kind of a funny story. And I thought he came home and the next morning he was gone. And I went into his room and I, started cleaning the sheets, and it was black all over the sheets. And I freaked out, and I went in and told Greg, I think he was in the hospital last night and they fed him charcoal. I'm like telling him he's OD'd or something. And I'm worried about him, because this was black. Like tattoo was the last thing I thought that he got. I don't even know how old he was, but he was underage. And so I tracking him down, and he's like laughing so hard. Oh my God, Mom. He's like, I just got a tattoo. I didn't OD, and that's the type of judgment that, Ronnie lived with it too. And that's where I have to like own, I've owned a lot of that since his death, and just like, gosh, dang, what an idiot I was, but I'm okay with it. I know that he laughed at me half the time and laughed it off, but I'm sure it hurt. I'm sure it hurt that I would, go right there. Just the first thing I thought,
a lot of times, usually when people judge the book by its cover and they see me with face tattoos and this and that, and it's those are the people that I like to change their opinions.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times after talking to me for 5 minutes, they're like, oh, like I had this complete, one-sided view of how people like you are going to be like and stuff like that. And then you completely defied that mental projection that I had of those type of people. And I think, at first when I first started getting tattoos when I was like 14 or 15, and I liked the idea of the shock, awe, appeal of tattoos being visible. And that was a different time where you know, you had a tattoo underneath your, you know, below your sleeve line, like it was taboo to have it. And now it's I think
Everybody
the
has
opinions,
tattoos.
yeah, the opinions are slowly changing
Oh
throughout the
yeah.
generations, to where now I'm having, like you were talking about, like I'm having a 78-year-old woman come up to me and asking me about my face tattoos and what they mean, and what they say and how bad do they hurt and stuff like that, just because they generally want to know. Where you also got the same side of the, or the opposite side of the spectrum, where I'll be in an elevator and I've had, you know, old white ladies clutch their purse because they see me, you know. And then so those are usually the people like that I don't even give, you know, two bothers of whether to change their opinion, because whether I try to change it or not, it's not going to really change.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's pretty funny because once I actually got my hair done, one of my buddies at work's like, man, you got tattoos on your face and all over your hands and throat. Now you have dreadlocks. You're just throwing your white privilege right away, bro. I was like, I didn't know I had any to begin with, but you know
like,
what I
man, I
mean?
missed that.
If you could tell me, if you could, you know, relay that to the police, maybe we'd have a different conversation. But
I love it.
I mean,
Love it.
besides that, I did want to kind of get into how you've kind of seen the spectrums of how people are treating mental illnesses. I mean, because I think we've all been able to see in our lifetime where, you know, back when we were kids, like, you know, ADHD, depression, all that stuff wasn't real to, you know, back then. You know what I mean? Like, I mean,
Yeah.
obviously it was real, but it wasn't, you know, it was something that people were just ill-equipped to deal with. And so they just decided to sweep it under the rug. And
Yeah.
I mean, I personally, I mean, I kind of come from, I have a lot of experience gangbanging and stuff like that. And in that kind of world, depression, like you gotta, you know, like that shit's gonna get you killed. You know what I mean? If you're out moping around, like you got bigger things to worry about than how you're gonna pay your bills. You gotta worry about someone coming on the block or this or that, you know what I mean? And throughout that, I've definitely seen a change in that community as well, of how they treat mental illnesses and how they're trying to what's the word I'm thinking of, trying to kind of help the younger generations and kind of
Yeah.
and bring that in. But I want to know how you've seen a change of how people have treated mental illnesses and just the overall, you know, the mental wellness throughout your time periods of having issues with depression and stuff like that.
Yeah. So that's a great question. So obviously early when we were brought up, I don't know how old you are, but I'm 43. So born in 78, brought up in the 80s. You boys didn't cry. You
Right.
did not talk about your feelings. Depression was an attitude, just smile and be happy. So we grow up being tough and not feeling right inside and getting to that boiling point. So, you know, we're fighting daily at school. You know, we were just, if we had a problem, we handled it. And as we go through that, a lot of guys are dealing with anger, and you end up getting married and it's not what your parents told you it was, and you get divorced and life's falling apart. Guys in the military, guys in gangs, dealing with seeing things or being in an abusive household, and you know what you saw, you don't know how to explain it, and you're holding on to those things, and they start manifesting as an adult. It's scary. And PTSD and depression and anxiety and ADHD and all of these different things, they're just finding that it's super real. And the best way to go about it is being vulnerable and working through it. You know, we in the 90s, it was like, kill the pain. We're going to opioid the hell out of everybody. We don't want anybody in pain anymore. Here's a bunch of Xanax and Prozacs, and everybody's going to be good. And that was just masking the problem. So now we've got a bunch of adult parents passing down some bad knowledge to their
My
kids.
generation, yeah.
And come to find out the whole time is it's about the village. You know, when we grew up, the village raised the kid. I got my ass whipped by a bunch of parents in the neighborhood. My dad high-fived them. Right now, parents are trying to wear every hat. Like they're the coach, they're the counselor, and they suck at 90% of them. When little Johnny down the street's been through some stuff and they could probably help out way easier. keeping everything family secret. It's like nobody knows that anybody's even having a hard time until they're in rehab or until they end up in the newspaper or until so. And they're still way behind, but in the last 10 years, people are finally starting to talk about it. But I don't even think that the mindset of people, especially the older, and I think they're about on their way out, the 80-year-olds and the guys that grew up in some tough stuff, and they will go to their grave without shedding a tear, you know, and that culture is leaving. But the problem has been now that it's going so soft the other way. It's like everybody needs bubble wrap. So everybody on the planet has anxiety. Everybody has depression. Everybody, like, suicide's like cool. And it's like self-harm. And so it's man, people are talking about it. And with that comes the abuse of that, attention seeking behaviors. So I'm super dialed in on, I am cool to talk about anything you want to, but you have to be willing to take some action at the end of it. I don't want to hear the same story about your wife or what happened to you as a kid every time I see you. I want to hear about it. I want to help you grow through it. And I want to give you the tools necessary to get better, because you don't have to live that way anymore. And when people get on board with that and they're willing to do the work, life can be freaking amazing. Like, I was homeless 12 years ago, and now my life is just stupid fun. And I just don't, the more I talk about it, we can be the change as far as going into schools, going into churches, and being real. And it's amazing how many people have the same thing in common. Like, Jerk, I promised I could have you come out here to Motown, Utah, and you sit in the middle of a priesthood meeting and talk about your life, and the people are going to be like, wait, what, who? Like, that dude's just like me. I didn't think anybody understood me, and I hated AA. I'm in rehab for like the third time, and I'm head down on the table, and I hear this person talking, and I'm like, yeah, she's going in and swearing and telling her story, and about 10 minutes in, I'm up like, yeah, and I look over, it was like an 80-year-old lady. I'm like, shit, you mean I'm not different? Maybe somebody has been through this, but we didn't dare talk about it until you get in a room full of crisis people, So these podcasts are just freaking amazing, because people get to hear us all over the world.
Yeah.
And know, like, wait, I don't even know these guys, and they feel like my brother.
Yeah.
They feel like my dad. Like, I identify with that guy. And if that's all we do, we want to help at least one person. Chances are we're going to help thousands. And the biggest part, since I've been doing mine or working with the kids, is I've learned more than I've probably ever taught them. Just to see the love and compassion of these little kids that haven't learned all of our nasty adulthood stuff. It's like, man, that is real love right there. It's amazing.
Was there like a pivotal moment while you were having issues with addiction that kind of turned your head the other way and made you realize that, hey, I need to quit this shit? And for a lot of people, I know for me, it was my kids, seeing them and dealing with they're dealing with kids their same age that are, out doing these fentanyl pills and overdosing. And these are kids in 6th, 7th grade, and that was something that was unheard of when I was that age. We were more worried about girls and stuff like that than trying to score a pill.
Yeah. So for me, again, man, I was like bipolar. My addiction was bipolar. My life was bipolar. I'd be super high, get super sober, and then crash and burn. And I had just got married in the LDS temple, got my business back up and running. I own a concrete company. I'd build a house. I'm making like 35 grand a month. And my daughter, we ended up getting pregnant, and I was a big soccer player, and I was sober for like 2 years, and I relapsed. I blew my ACL, and I had to go to surgery. So I relapsed like 18 months into my sobriety. And then by the time my daughter was born, I was just faking really good that I was sober, doing my best. And it got to the point once she was born, in my head, I was like, you know what? I can't even take care of myself. How am I going to take care of this little baby? So I didn't get better. I got worse. And my wife left me, and there was some things that happened in that time. And, I a few years before that, I overdosed. I was in a coma for 10 days, and that didn't stop me. And now it's like, I just got married in the temple. I broke my promise with God. I broke my promise with my wife. I let my family down again. It's like shame, shame, shame. And now this beautiful little girl. And my dad had, when I was relapsed, I'm living on their couch. And one night, every time I thought about killing myself, it went back to that conversation I had with him in the garage. And I'm like, how can I do this without hurting my dad? And I was like, well, I can accidentally overdose. So I went out and bought 8 balloons of heroin, and I went downstairs and I shot them up. And the worst thing happened. I woke up the next day, and I felt like either this is hell, no matter what I do, I have to keep reliving this Groundhog Day of just survival every single day. Did God forget about me? All these questions. And by this time, my wife had left me, and my dad came down a few days later, and he handed me a piece of paper, and he said, read it. And I started reading it, and he had written my obituary. He said, I know you're going to die, but you can't do it in my basement. You got to go. And spent a few days in my car in Salt Lake trying to be a tough guy, homeless dude. And I just got to finally knew that my daughter deserved more. And that meant me finally killing myself. So the only way I could see my daughter is if it was with my parents to supervise that. And the only way I could get back in my parents' house if it was to see my daughter. And I set that up so I could go up and kiss everybody goodbye and let them know I loved them. And on the way out, I snatched a gun and went up above the Bountiful Temple. We have big mountains, and there's a beautiful Mormon temple at the top. And there's a hiking trail right across from it that you can go up and sit on these benches that overlooks the temple, and got nice and high and make sure I was really going to do it this time. And knelt down and put that gun in my mouth, started pulling the trigger, and had these visions of my mom and my daughter pop in my head. In rehab, they make you do pro and cons lists, right? And I'm like, man, anybody could come into my daughter's life and do a better job of being a father than me. I will never embarrass her. Like, I could think of a million reasons why she would be fine without me. And so that went away. And then my mom's was like, man, she's such a God-loving woman. I said, you know what? I'm going to pray to her God so that when he doesn't answer my prayers, that when she dies, she can go look him in the face and say, you failed me. And I knelt back down and put that gun in my mouth. And I said a prayer. I said, I don't know anything about a still small voice. I'm going to need something a little bit louder than that. And if I don't get it by the time I open my eyes, I'm pulling the trigger. And that was August 31st, 2009. And as I started pulling the trigger and opened my eyes, a firework display went off above the temple. And right after that, I heard a little voice and said, is that loud enough? And I was paralyzed, and I laid there bawling in the dirt. And at this point, I hate religion. I hate God, if there even is one, but I could not deny what I had just heard. And once I got the strength to get up, I took the gun to my dad, told him what had happened, and I drove myself straight to the hospital. And my sobriety date is September 1st, 2009.
That's awesome.
And I've worked recovery, studied psychology, applied it to fitness. I could never really learn in a classroom, so I needed to do hard shit and apply the psychology into that. But the first 9 months of my sobriety, my wife divorced me, the bank came and took everything, and my dad died.
Oh, God.
So I had a chance to level up. It's like plenty of reasons to relapse or kill myself. And at that point, I was so mad at God. I was like, if there is a heaven, my dad's there, and he's probably running the show anyway. So I just started praying to my dad. And that was my spirituality for a long time. And I learned to love myself through my daughter's eyes, and learned to be a man when, I needed the beautiful wife to make myself feel good. I needed the big truck to look good. And I needed my dad to pay for that when I couldn't. and God decided to remove all three. And that made me humble up and make some big boy decisions. And my journey ever since, 12 plus years, has been nothing short of magical, hard, beautiful. Like, it's even my good days are awesome, you know, because now I'm living with my eyes wide open, so I can see pain coming down the road. I don't have to wait for it to kick me in the nuts every time and be like, hey, stupid, we're back, you shouldn't have done that, you know. So I'm making better decisions. And
So
yeah.
I feel like I know the answer just from dealing with bouts of depression myself, but do you feel like in your case that being bipolar, it kind of fueled the rate of drug use that you're doing?
Oh yeah, because the here's the other part of that is anybody who's been on drugs for X amount of time and tries to stop, they are going to display bipolar behaviors.
Oh,
Yep.
Because their body's crashing. And then you add that on to actual bipolar. When I did coke, and I'm not exaggerating, I would snort an 8-ball in one line. That would start the night with a bottle of Wild Turkey 101. You know how that goes. That's a bad night. You know, and that was a Monday. So to avoid those feelings of extreme happiness or extreme lows, I just was a garbage can of anything. I didn't care what it was, that I would just take it. And then obviously the come down, from trying to manage the come down from that, I was all over the place. Like I was not a safe dude to be around. It fueled the rage. It fueled just really put myself in some really dangerous situations. And
George,
oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, I'm just saying, anybody that deals with depression and you mask it with weed or even something's weed and alcohol, it works for that minute, but whatever you were running from is still waiting there for you. And then you have to repeat and more, and then it's just a battle, man. So I'm a know nothing guy, and I would love to explain that in a way to people that could make sense to their lives. Like, I still have so much fun and I'm a wild man, but my decisions are educated now. They're not just acting out and running a fool, you know?
I'm Christian, I'm Mormon still. I want to point out, in my experience in religious or spiritual or whichever you want to call it, experiences like you had, like that's a major experience. It doesn't usually happen. It doesn't happen a lot. And usually those kind of experiences don't happen with the people that are living a super righteous, God-fearing life, like your mom, like you explained. I've had rare experiences like that. And the times that I have had them is when I was the lowest and most probably not living the way I should, the way I know to live, Yeah. So God does listen. That's just a message I want to hear. Whatever, I want to just point out, whatever God you're believe in, whatever you were sitting there not believing in God at all. And you spoke to God and he listened, So my point is that, if you're religious in I don't care what religion, and you think you own the corner of the relationship with Jesus Christ or God, you're absolutely wrong. You do not. And he speaks to anyone who will listen. And you were in a place where you were really listening.
Yeah, I think anything short of what happened, I wouldn't be here right now.
Right.
He's like, this fool needs, he's going to take some extra credit. But I think that with whether you believe in energy or even if you're an atheist, like there's still something, Mother Nature, the creator, whatever you want to call it, like it doesn't matter to me. When people ask me what my spirituality is like, and I don't know if you guys have a chuckarama or a buffet place, but mine's chuckarama, man. I like a little bit of ham, and I like mac and cheese, and I like chicken fingers, and I like a salad, and I like a brownie. Like, I'm going to use whatever works for me. It doesn't need to work for you.
Right.
Like, I don't care. If it makes you a better person, then do that.
Right.
And that's like, I've seen some of your tagging stuff. Super awesome. If that brings you together with people to be artistic and creative, and do that. Like, people get off on these ideas of what it should be. And I don't care what it is. If it's bringing people together and they're doing better because of it, game on. Other than drug, like obviously not false stuff like
Illegal, right? Yeah.
sex and drugs and all that stuff. But in general, if it's teaching a lesson and it's making people practice and do something better than they were the day before, you call it whatever you want. It's just too much. I don't have enough oxygen to sit and argue that point. Like, cool, yours is God, yours is Allah, yours is Buddha, yours is whoever. I don't care.
I'm with you. I've met some of the neatest people who have the most different beliefs than I do. And it's not something I was open to before. And I'm so grateful for that.
Yeah.
You know, going back to what I was made a note here, what you said about the generation that I'm just at the tail end. I'm not as old as the 80-year-olds. I'm not going to talk about that, but I am getting up there. And I didn't live as a teenager. I had a rough life too. And do you know that I had a baby? I've said this before. I had a baby, gave him up for adoption, got pregnant at 14, gave him up for adoption. I was 15 by the time I had him. Never spoke of him. Didn't even know his gender till I was in my 30s. Just got reunited with him a few years ago and just had somebody, in fact, it's Bridget, it's a mutual friend of Rob and I, who has done so much with me to help me understand that she was the first person I ever said to me, you're suffering from PTSD. And I'm like, no, I'm not. That's what military people go through, not me, you know. And she's like, no, you know, she was telling me the things that you've gone through in your life and the burying it and not talking about it and not exposing that your dad abused you and all these things has molded your way of thinking and the ability for you to read or to talk about it is empowering for you. And then you can't even imagine the amount of people you help. And it's taken me, like, I've only known her for 2.5 years now. And it's taken me that long to see, I've taken a break from my writing right now because it just was so emotional. And I'm going to come out like gangbusters when I'm ready in a couple of weeks and get this done. And I just know that people talking about it, my generation or the one right above me, you didn't even, they remember the shows on TV, you guys don't, but they had TV shows like Dick Van Dyke, where they had a married couple with twin beds, because you can't show that on TV,
Yeah.
And it's just the most craziest stuff. And
it's all that stuff. You get locked in the basement. Nobody wants, that's family shame. You don't do that.
And so my whole life, I felt like I wasn't good enough because I've done this thing. I gave this baby away and done this thing that is absolutely in my heart unimaginable. That's not the kind of mom I am. Just not. You can ask my kids. I'm kind of an over powerful, loving mother. And I couldn't come to grips with, how did I do that? How could I do that? And I did. And he forgave me. And, talking about it was the best thing I could ever do.
Yeah.
So
I think that's what it comes down to is everybody has a piece of the puzzle. And if we don't share it, we're not going to complete.
Right.
And that's just how it is. I love, you go sit in an old folks home with some people that haven't had a visitor for a minute.
Oh.
And they have some of the most amazing stories. And I think they don't care anymore. They just want to get it out. They want to talk about their regrets. They want to talk about the greatness and tell you the things that you should be doing, and don't waste time doing this. Right. I love hearing that, but it shouldn't have taken them 85 years sitting up with no family around to tell somebody.
It's so sad.
Like, good, bad, or ugly, we all have something to share. And if we don't share it, society's going to keep going to shit.
Yeah, I agree. I'm grateful for Bridget putting us together, because I think
me as well. As well.
You and I can help each other and help others. And Dirk's part of that scene. Dirk's a wonderful guy.
I'd love to link up when I come down.
Bear. Yeah.
My sister lives in.
I'm sorry. Keep going.
I was to say she lives in Surprise.
Oh, okay.
I come down once in a while.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. Just anytime you're down here, man, give me a holler. But since September 1st, 2008, what has led you onto the journey of what you do right now? I mean, I know you kind of wear many hats. You're a life coach, you do fitness, you do a lot of stuff with youth and stuff like that. Was there I mean, how did you lead yourself into to doing stuff like that?
So I went back to school because I couldn't afford a therapist, and I only wanted to take psychology so I could find out why I was so messed up. And I just got a Pell Grant because I couldn't afford. I went from a $500,000 home down in North Salt Lake to being on government assisted living and food stamps. You know, pretty humbling experience. And then I couldn't afford a therapist, so I got a Pell Grant, and I went to school, and they're all telling me, you need to test into math and English. I'm like, no, I just want to take psychology. I'm not trying to get a degree. I just want to know. And they're like, okay. And I had this really cool professor who very quickly into my program, I told him a little bit about me, and I told him I'm not going to school for anything other than this. And he told me to go buy these certain books in the bookstore, like Psychology 101 up to like FBI profiling. And he said, write down your story, all the things you've ever struggled with, and study your life. And finding out that a lot of it was just biological, and it's just who I was, and being able to know all these labels. There's, you know, your anxiety disorder, your sleep disorder, your bipolar, your all these things. Like, you okay, take this pill for the rest of your life. I didn't want to do that. So as I started learning it, it was like, I'm not my diagnosis. I may have experienced those things, but that doesn't have to be the rest of my life. So with psychology and the help of fitness, I went on this crazy journey of facing my fears. That's what got me into speaking, because I was terrified of speaking in front of people. I was terrified of getting beat up. So I started cage fighting. I hated running, but I was running this race shortly after my dad passed, and it was like at 2 a.m, and I had this experience where I felt like my dad was running with me. And in my addict mind, I'm like, all right, I just got to run really hard, and my dad's gonna come save me. And so I started running ultra marathons, and he never came back. But there's something to learn about when you're 25 miles into the mountains and you're dead tired and you have nothing left to give, and you still have 25 miles to get out and nobody's coming to save you. You learn a little bit about yourself. So I fell in love with applying psychology to doing really hard things, to training like a Navy SEAL, like all the stuff that David Goggins is talking about right now. I've done. You know, I lived that way. I did the ice baths. I did the big races. I did the fighting. I dug deep, deep inside of myself until there was nothing left. It's like, if I exposed those monsters, all the scary parts of me, and brought them into the light, they didn't like living there. They wanted to stay inside and make me scared and make me feel less than. And the more I did it, the better I felt. The more people would want to be around, the more money I made. Like, all these things started happening for me, and I just went all in. Like, you can go back on my Facebook since the day I started, and my message has not wavered a bit. And I didn't have a plan at the start. You know, I was barely rubbing 2 pennies together. Didn't have any idea. Now I get to help a lot of people. You know, I get to, man, it's a dream. It wasn't even a dream. Like, I didn't want to help people. That's the last thing I wanted to do. I didn't want to be of service. It's the last thing I want to do. People hear my name and school combined, and they're like, what, Rob Eastman? Like, bullshit. I'm like, and I joke, I'm like, they did give me the only padded room in the school, but you know, but it just was not the plan. And now it burns so deep inside of me. Like, I had a normal job, and I'd been training some addicts, and I'd been transitioning some guys out of prison because my fights were aired on TV. And I fell in love with that, like seeing the light go on in people's eyes, and just running and doing hard things and lifting heavy weights and punching each other in the face. And my boss, he brought me in, he's like, hey, you didn't shave today. And that was my popping off point. That was my God's them saying, okay, time to be an entrepreneur. And I quit and I went all in on Eastman Fitness, and I started training people in the park and really using it to spit my psychology that I was learning because I was so proud of it. And that morphed into me owning a gym, and I've been doing that for 11 years. And I've got every mental health cert, and like I'm fascinated with that world and being around kids. You know, I'm speaking over 10,000 youth a year and
Wow.
around a whole bunch of other people. And in Utah, it's, I mean, not a big deal, but I can't go anywhere around the surrounding states without somebody being like, "Oh, aren't you that guy?" And I never thought that. I never saw that for myself. I never saw myself in politics. But if we don't get up and change some things, nothing's ever going to change. It's going to be the good old boys club until we die. And I don't want that for my kid. If we're not the change, like my brother, or was it somebody told me, and I think I told you this, but somebody was like, Rob, we know you don't need church, but church needs you. And I was like, shit. They're like, if guys like you don't come in and change the culture, who's gonna? Like, damn, now I gotta go to church, you know. But that's the way it goes. If we don't, the guys who have been through some stuff, if we don't make some changes, one in ourselves, but then also in the culture around us, like, hey, we tried it this way, pretty dangerous. Our kids, you know, if you would let your kid do that, great. If not, then you shouldn't stand for it no more. You know what I mean? And I want to be somebody, I don't want to tell my kid what to do. I want to show him what to do. And that's just what it came down that when I got old enough and my daughter started mimicking me, it was time to level up. And now she's just, I mean, I don't even know, man. It's just a blessing when you're searching, not self-seeking, but self-searching. That I put a post up the other day that there's no destination, there's only false summits. And if you don't learn to enjoy the journey, you're going to be screwed.
Yeah.
You know, when you feel like you've arrived, that's the universe allowing you to take a breather, get some new underwear on, strap up, and get ready for the next climb.
You got a new mountain.
You know, because it's always going to kick your ass. Every time I think I got it figured out, God's more than happy to knock me off my pedestal. So I quit hopping on the pedestal, and I get some rest, and I do what I can. I do the next right thing, and I'm not perfect by any means, but my life is pretty freaking fun. And I get to hang out with people I love every day. And I get to do pretty wild activities often. And it keeps me fueled up, you know.
Do you have any upcoming events that people that by the time they see this, they might be able to want to come check you out, maybe locally or?
Yeah, so I'm doing a lot of stuff in Utah. I think 2022 will be the year where I'll be hitting some bigger stages. I also have a book coming out, and I'm shooting for like mid-summer of 2022. That'll be my journey and all of some of the lessons I've learned along the way about, you know, we like to blame everybody. We like to blame the Mormons, blame my parents, blame whoever, but when you find that extreme ownership, because all we can change is what we have on our own self. And once I took all the blame and just handled my stuff, my life changed. And I think I'm not very smart in the sense, like I was not a good student, you know. So if I can do it, anybody can do it. And if I would have had a guide, like unfortunately it took me a little longer than it would now, knowing what I know. But if I can help somebody, if they have that burning desire in their soul to get better and have some ideas, like I'm big on pushing passion and finding what you love and teaching you how to make money doing that. So you don't have to work a 9 to 5, so you can be home for your kids, so that you can just bounce out of bed on a Monday because you were so excited. You hate the weekends because you don't get to do what you love. Right. And I feel like there's a whole culture change that can happen that way. So that's what my events. I hope to be on lots of stages and putting out movies and doing big things. So
That's awesome.
I'm coming. I'm coming for sure. You'll hear my name.
If somebody wanted to find you and follow you, how would they do that?
I do most of my work on Instagram, and it's Tattooed Life Coach and the number 8. Rob Eastman on Facebook. And then my life coaching stuff is tattooedlifecoach.com. And then like I do online stuff, face to face on Zoom, like just helping people out of dark places, or whether it be fitness, nutrition, mental health, parenting. Like I've covered the spectrum, man. I work with a lot of wild things. So if I can't help you, I can definitely find somebody who can. But I love connecting with people all over the world and leading people out of darkness.
And you also have a podcast. What's the name of that?
Yeah, so my podcast is called Stand and Fight. So, and it's found everywhere and has a mental health, everything, a lot of taboo conversations that people don't like to hear but need to hear. And so we'll be putting yours up here pretty quick.
Yeah, I got the pleasure of being a guest a couple of weeks. No, I don't even think it's been that long, a week or so ago. And I appreciate that, Rob.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys doing this. It's like, no matter how big or small, somebody's going to hear it. Somebody needed to hear it, and you guys are making a difference. So when it's a pain in the butt, sometimes I know my podcast is like my passion project. So it's like 5th or 6th down the road because I got other stuff I got to do. But the response you find from people all over the world, just random things. It's like, I listened to your podcast. You're like, you're in freaking Japan. And they're talking about how it changed their life. It's like, this is the stuff we're talking about. This has no boundaries. It doesn't care what color you are, how much money you make. The one thing us as humans share is struggle. And that's a beautiful thing once everybody understands that.
Well, that was sort of me and Jerk's idea, meeting Jerk, and we just came up with this idea that our worlds collided when Ronnie died, and two worlds can't collide. We live totally different type of lifestyles and became really close friends. And I wanted to say one thing about that is, you talk about Christianity, and what I learned about Christianity when my son died was incredible, because I'm not pointing fingers at anybody, because I have the greatest friends. I have the greatest ward and community of church members and stuff who were there for me. But the ones that stayed with me and have stayed with me weren't my church friends. And it was people like Jerk and some of Ronnie's, good friends who check in on me religiously. I know that not that would ever happen, because I just don't get in those kind of situations. But if I did actually get in a bad situation with somebody I was helping, and I thought the whole gang was going to come after, in fact, tried to come after this kid, and I'm like, whoa, you guys are protecting me, but I don't want anybody hurt, but they're great people that have been there for me. And that's Christianity. That's what it's all about, is serving others and loving one another. And so that was a big lesson for me and my whole family. My sons are just blown away. My son, who was the elders quorum president when Ronnie died, he privately just crying to me and said, he was far better Christian than I ever could be. And just learn. Yeah,
there's a lot of blinders to be ripped off. And, I love the people of the church and my family and everything else. But the thought that if you're not a part of that there's no spirituality or understanding of the heavens, that's crazy talk, Yeah. So, but I appreciate it. I love sitting here looking at you guys' 2 pictures.
Yeah, it's quite weird.
It's awesome. It's awesome for sure.
I've been kind of sick, so I look pretty icky, but Jerk and I are like 2 different people. We love each other. I know he would be there for me, and I would for him. So, and his family. I haven't got to meet his boys yet, which is a bad thing, but they've moved around a lot. And
yeah, well, I hope to meet you both in person.
Yeah,
I want to speak with you. I want to do. You talked about that. Anytime you find some fireside, wants you, I'd love to speak with you.
Yeah, we can do that anytime. I'm just freeing up some time. I'm actually in the works of opening a youth treatment center. So we got meetings. We met with the accountant today and meeting with our lawyers and gonna have that going. So
I'd
once
love
I
to
get some
see
time
that.
freed
Yeah.
up, then
Yeah.
I'll be able to do a lot more.
Well, we're getting a little bit closer to moving up there too, so that'll be good.
Awesome.
Okay.
Awesome.
Well,
Well,
thank you.
Rob, it's been dude, it's been a wild trip listening to your story, man, and it's definitely inspirational. And I'm gonna make sure to put all your information up there, all the websites and stuff, so people can definitely reach out to you and look at the good word that you're promoting and all the stuff that you do in your day-to-day life. I mean, does anyone have any last questions or anything before we wrap this up? Or
No, I just want to thank you. That's it.
Yeah, thank you both. Appreciate it.
yeah, man, we definitely appreciate you coming on and sharing your story. And I definitely look forward to meeting you in the future and definitely chopping it up, you know.
Awesome. Sounds good, guys.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
With that being said, guys,
Love you
it's
guys.
been another episode of When Worlds Collide. Make sure to like, comment, share, subscribe. You know, that whole jingle. With that being said, man, hope you guys have a good day and see you guys later. Peace.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.